Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Prabhupada ki. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning, everyone. Today we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Text 4, Chapter 4, Text 5. 3, 4, 5. Tata api tad abhipretam janamaham arindama prishtato vagamam bharto paravish vish lashanka shamaha tarapi tad api pretam janam aham arindama prishtato vagamam bharto paravishleshanka shamaha tata api. Yet in spite of tat abhiprechatam pretam, his desire, janan, knowing, aham, I, arindama, O subduer of the enemy, vidura, prishtata, behind, anvagamam, followed, bhartu, of the master, paravishleshana, separation from his lotus feet, akshama, not being able. Translation. There's no purport to this one, so I'll read the next verse as well. Yet in spite of my knowing his desire to destroy the dynasty, O Arindama, Vidura, I followed him because it was impossible for me to bear separation from the lotus feet of the Master. This is text 6. Thus following, I saw my patron and master, Lord Sri Krishna, sitting alone and deeply thinking, taking shelter on the bank of the Sarasvati, although he is a shelter of the goddess of fortune. Purport. Those who are in the renounced order of life often take shelter underneath a tree. The Lord was found by Uddhava in that condition of taking shelter as do persons who have no shelter. Because he is the proprietor of everything, everywhere is his shelter, and everywhere is under his shelter. The entire material and spiritual cosmic manifestation is sustained by him, and therefore he is the shelter of everything. So there is nothing astonishing in his taking shelter in a way of the unsheltered who are in the renounced order of life. Let's read the last verse again quickly. Thus following, I saw my patron and master, Lord Sri Krishna, sitting alone and deeply thinking, taking shelter on the bank of the river Sarasvati, although he is the shelter of the goddess of fortune. So these, as Chaitanya Charampavu was pointing out in his classes, these verses are giving us a glimpse, or as he called it, a trailer of what's coming up. And we're hearing some of these little snippets from pastimes that we'll hear about more so in the 10th canto. So Uddhava is recollecting these pastimes to Vidura, and they are in the remembrance of Krishna. You'll find in the couple of chapters before this one, when Vidura questions Uddhava about, can you tell me about Krishna? Can you talk to me about Krishna? Uddhava automatically goes into a state of ecstasy, and he says that he enters the spiritual world in that moment, and then he kind of collects himself and he comes back from, you see in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, they mention that a lot. They go from internal consciousness to external consciousness. So Uddhava was displaying this also in this particular moment, where he internally went in, and at that point he was able to be in the spiritual world just through his power of remembrance. And then they come back to external consciousness, where they're around exhibiting what's happening in this world. So he just starts talking about all these different events that happen through the course of Krishna's life. And it's very short and concise. His little, just one verse, he'll describe a whole pastime. And you'll say like, oh, Krishna lived in Govardhan Hill and saved the inhabitants of Vrindavan from Indra's wrath or something. So for us, this remembrance is very important. And we need to develop that, which is something we need to all work on. In the beginning of spiritual life, we have Shravanam Kirtanam. We're hearing and we're discussing and talking about Krishna. But then when we go away and we go back to whatever we're doing, we kind of forget about Krishna. We just go about our daily activities. But it's when we come to the point of remembrance, that's when our devotional service takes on a different flavor, a different level. So coming to the point of remembrance is not so easy sometimes. We're quite busy in our service and our daily lives, especially if we have families and things like that. And we always get caught up in all these kind of things, and we forget to bring in Krishna, to add Krishna to the flavor. We just get stuck in our little daily activities. But Krishna gives us so many ways in which we can remember him. Like in the Bhagavad Gita, he gives, in chapter 10, he gives this whole list of different ways and things that we do in our daily lives and things we see in our daily lives that we can begin to remember. He says, I'm the light of the sun and the moon. I'm the taste in water. I am of bodies of water. I'm the ocean. So many things that we can experience. And then in the Bhagavatam, he also mentions that, the trees are the hairs of my body and the rivers are my veins. So when we see these things, we can relate it to Krishna. And that helps the process of this remembrance. We see something material, but when we have our intelligence, like our spiritual intelligence, then when we see things, we don't see them in a material way. We see them, oh, this is part of Krishna's body in some way, like it's his, he says it's his veins or his, the hairs on his body, or we see the sun, it's like, well, Krishna says it's his eyes. So we can begin like this, the process of remembering. And then we come together in groups and we read some of these beautiful pastimes of Krishna and the gopis and the cowherd boys. And those pastimes really sweeten that remembrance, because it puts Krishna, it makes Krishna a person, allows us to see him and accept him as a person. For a lot of people coming to spiritual life, that can be a problematic situation also, when we've started again, it's the same kind of principle. We started a train of thought, and because of that train of thought, to change it to a different concept takes some time. So to accept Krishna as a person is not necessarily an easy thing, because we have all our hang-ups about someone has form, then how can someone with a form have be perfect and not have any flaws and be the absolute truth, and all these kind of arguments that we come up with. But Krishna's body, everything about Krishna is not anything that we've actually experienced before. So to try and conceive of Krishna, it's a very inconceivable thing, although it is conceivable. That's Krishna's will. If he feels that we're sincere enough and we're really endeavoring and trying to understand him, then he will help us to understand and remember. He says in Bhagavad Gita that from him comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So depending on our desire and our focus and how much we want something, and Krishna will reciprocate with that. So say take Rukmini, for example. She never actually met Krishna before he came in on the chariot and took her away. But because she had heard so much about him, she developed this love for him. She wanted him so much that she wrote this letter saying, "You got to save me. This other guy, he wants to marry me, but I don't want to marry him." So she had never met him, but because she had heard from others about him, she naturally became attracted by his qualities, by his hearing about his beauty and how he conducts himself. So for us also, this is an important thing, is that we hear the pastimes of Krishna, and it has different effects on us. Like it softens our heart, for one, because we can become a little hard. When it's just philosophy, we can get a little harder. But these sweet pastimes of Krishna with his cowherd boys and the gopis, it helps us to see God in a different light. Especially, again, like most of us have a background, we have some understanding of God. It's not necessarily he's someone we fear, or at least have awe and reverence for. But within Bhakti tradition, it's Krishna is he's not promoted as someone we have to fear. He's someone we have to love, and that's a total different. You don't get that concept in any other tradition, really. So we want to develop our love, we want to develop our remembrance, and that is done through hearing about Krishna, hearing from his devotees, reading these sweet little pastimes, and contemplating them. Because, like for me, like sometimes I read, and it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. You're just flicking through the pages, basically, but you're reading. But then you go back and you read the same pastime another time, and it's just like, if you actually try and picture what it's saying, it's like you can't imagine how amazing that is. to see like Radha and Krishna in some beautiful grove with all the gopis fussing about them, and they're just playing some instruments and they're singing and they're dancing. And this is all going on with no selfishness involved at all. It's just pure love for each other. Just to see something like that, we can't even conceive of how much beauty and perfectness is in that situation. So yeah, just being able to sit and contemplate and think, and like in the next couple of verses, you'll see like this is what Krishna does himself. He's now come to the he's sitting by the river, on the Saraswati River. And in the next few verses, you'll see like he's just hanging out. He's just sitting there thinking. Says he's Uddhava, because Uddhava's following him, so he's telling us what he's seeing when he's following Krishna. So Krishna comes down by the bank and he's sitting, just leaning up against a tree. He's got his leg like this, and he's just thinking. I don't know what he's thinking about, but so we need to also start to think in a deeper way about what we have been given. And again, it's hard when we're busy all the time because, like my spiritual master, he says our society is like, when you have a boat and it's going fast, it skips over the water, planing they call it. But when the boat slows down, it sinks into the water. So said in the same way, our society is going so fast it doesn't get in deep into anything. It's just skipping along. Said, but when we slow down, we have a chance to slow down. Then we can go a little deeper within ourselves and within understanding all these different topics. So we have to give ourselves that time to be able to sit and to think and to appreciate and to try and understand, contemplate these pastimes. Because Krishna, like I was saying to the Krishna Pad guys the other day, like when we read Prabhupada's books, all he's trying to do mostly is help us to understand the greatness of Krishna, how great he is. Like we don't necessarily appreciate that, how great he is. It takes a lot to accept that someone's greater than us, even in the material world. Like we don't want that. But then God, he's like infinitely more great than us. And to comprehend that, it's not easy. And then to accept it is also not easy. But yeah, the greatness of Krishna it's unimaginable. Like just as he's in his forms of Vishnu, Mahavishnu, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, Kashira Dakashayi Vishnu, those three manifestations. You have Mahavishnu lying in the ocean, causal ocean. And then when he breathes out, he emanates all the universes from his body. And then he enters into all those universes. And then, sprouts a lotus, and then enters into every atom. And the creation goes on for the length of Lord Brahma's life, which is like 311 trillion, 40 billion of our years. And then he breathes back in, and everything enters back into his body. So that's one breath cycle of Mahavishnu, and that's 311 trillion, 40 billion of our years. And then you have Krishna and Balaram up there, and they're above Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu is just in a expansion who is taking care of the material creation. So there's a to understand who Krishna is and Balaram, Radharani. It's not a cheap thing, but we are lucky enough that we have the chance, and we have the facilities, and we have each other to help us do that. So I'm not going to say much more, but if anyone has any comments and corrections. Money?
Hare Krishna. Thanks for the class. Yesterday, Yadu was with class on the neck of instruction. Then just on the first verse, they were talking about control in speech. And we kind of dabbled into, should one force that? So like it recommends that we should speak Krishna Kata. Should one force themselves to speak that in the beginning? And the same with devotional service or thinking and remembering Krishna. As a new devotee, should we be forcing ourselves to remember Krishna? Should we forcing ourselves to speak about Krishna? Should we forcing ourselves to read about Krishna? Like how far should we take that? Or is it more we just take our time and that just comes as kind of a natural
Progression.
Progression in Krishna consciousness? Should we fake it till we make it?
I think it's a bit of both. We have to endeavor to try and understand Krishna, but at the same time understand that the process takes time. It's a gradual thing. So we may not, sometimes we do have a lot of taste for some time. I know, like when I first started reading, I was just couldn't get enough. I was just like lapping it up. But then I came to the farm and just got busy in service, and that kind of, my reading slowed down a lot at that point. But I think everybody's different, of course. We're all individual, but there is a need to hear every day, whether we're here in class, whether we're reading. But it's essential that we hear something that is solid about Krishna every day. And it's like, we've been doing so many crazy things out there for God knows how many lifetimes. So our consciousness is full of all of that. So in order to shift that, we have to try and put something better in there. It's a process of taking that stuff out and then replacing it with Krishna. So some of us are able to do that more emphatically and just go for it and maintain that, whereas others like go through waves of like become like quite interested in studying and reading and hearing for a couple of months, and it's kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm going to do something else for a while now, and then come back again. But somehow or other, we just need to try and, like with the audiobooks, for me it really helps with the audiobooks because I just have them playing all the time. And especially if you're not a strong reader also, I find them really helpful because you're hearing all the time, like even when we go to bed, Dara, she's used to it now. But we just have something playing, whether it's the Chaitanya Charitamrita or Bhagavatam or something. So somehow or other, I just try and hear something. Yeah.
I really liked HG Goswami's analogy of the boat flying across the water and staying above kind of everything. With contemplation, I find that other faiths, like you see the Christian religion, like the monks within there, they really focus on this contemplation. There's books written about it by, monks who lived many, many years ago. It's something that I've realised lately that I don't do much. I spoke to you and Dara about this the other day. What's a good way to do that, to contemplate, where we're at in our own spiritual life, or contemplate Krishna and other subjects you were talking about today? Is it good to do it by ourselves or with groups of people or in circles? Because it is important. Sometimes we get so caught up, like you were saying, we can get caught up doing our services, and especially on a farm, when you're a farmachari, there's so much going on, and it's going at such a fast pace. And to operate this farm and to get this farm off the ground and running at the speed that it does, it takes lots and lots of manpower and lots of blood, sweat and tears. Lots of tears also. But it's so important to contemplate where we're at and have these deeper relationships with devotees. What advice do you have for devotees to, when it is going fast and when things are moving at such a rapid pace, how can we slow down, and what is the best way to contemplate where we're at, and the philosophy and our relationship with Prabhupada, the previous acharyas and so forth?
You give me the hard questions.
Asking Krishna, begging Krishna to engage us in service and to ask for His mercy, because I feel often for myself that I want to be in control of everything, and even into my sadhana and everything, and I get frustrated because it's not working. But in the end, it's maybe also Krishna to show me, like, okay, I can see you sincerely, but you're not in control. You still have to beg me for that mercy. Fair enough?
Yeah. Thank you. You got something to say, Joel?
I just like to share one quote of Prabhupada on remembering Krishna. Prabhupada said, we hear and we read, and we need to talk what we read and heard.
Yeah.
And also, if you can't talk, you write. Otherwise, you will forget.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to mention that also. We do an individual study, but coming together in groups has different effects, because when we're when we're reading by ourselves, we can get some understanding, and then to be able to say that in front of other people in a way that's tangible for others is a skill to learn also. And then to hear others people's realizations of the same verse will help us deepen our understanding as well. So definitely personal study, and like Julian said, I'm not a big writer, but I know it's important. Some people, they can't remember unless they write down. So if you are struck by something in a verse or a purport, write it down. And I was saying that the other day. They have it was Krishna Rupa. She has a book, remember? She's got an alphabet book. So if she hears something like a quote or something in Prabhupada's purports or that starts with A, she'll write it down in the A section. So yeah, there's little ways to help us remember. And I guess with the writing also, when you go back over time and you see what you've written down a year or two earlier, you can see the growth that you've had from that point, because you can remember something that you've forgotten also. remember last year I went home and my mum pulled out this box of stuff that I had in up in the attic there somewhere. And I found this old diary I had when I was traveling around the world. And I started reading it, and I'm just like, who is this guy? It's like, I don't even know who this is anymore. So, yeah, you kind of, like Chaitanya Charan was mentioning also yesterday, like, we, sometimes it's hard to see how we're still making progress because it doesn't feel like it sometimes. Sometimes the progress is fast, and then we kind of, it slows down. But, yeah, we need to, and that introspection helps us with that also, because we can look back at who we were and what we did and how we lived, and now this is what I'm doing, this is my life now. And slowly, because we just want everything now, but Krishna consciousness can happen like that, but for most of us, the process of surrender really takes time. So during that time, slowly, we're making little steps, little baby steps, little Gopal steps. So yeah, we just do the best we can, hang out with each other, take prasadam together is another thing. It's really important to take prasadam together as a community. And again, like, it's as we get to know Krishna more, we need to get to know the devotees more also, because it makes everything sweeter the life, the happier the life. Anybody have anything else to say? Okay, Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki.